listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. And Michael, I don't know if you saw the news earlier this week, but hey, a week from now, we're going to be breaking down the NFL schedule. The schedule release next Wednesday. We're going to get the time, the place, the who, what, when, where on all of this stuff. I mean, we know who's playing who, but we don't know when it's going to happen or when the back-to-backs are, the three straight road games. I can't wait for it. And we're going to get the betting markets as well, buddy. They're going to be firing out.
And the TV schedule. And we get the TV schedule. We get to see who's going to be on Monday night, who's going to be on Sunday night. I mean, so that's going to be fun to watch and see. It's always great to get the schedule. When you're in the league, the schedule, everybody gets so caught up on the schedule, right? Oh, we're playing this team. You know, if you're playing, like last year, if you had the Jets on the schedule, okay, maybe a tough game if Rodgers is good. But when he got hurt in game one, 13 seconds into the game, you know, the Jets didn't become a hard game. So I think we make way too much about the longevity of the schedule. In terms of how it values, but I think you have to look at it in terms of how it's set up, you know, how many road games, how many last year Houston played 17 1 o'clock games. You don't think that matters? You know, you don't have your routine changed. You don't have to do anything differently. You know, it's the same thing over. The players know when the ball's getting kicked. So it's a pretty good thing, right? I mean, so when you do that, you got to feel pretty comfortable about, you know, your routine and all that. And so now when you get the schedule, you got to figure out, do we go on the road? Do we stay 2 weeks on the West Coast like the Giants did last year? How do we handle all those things? And, you know, the teams, so the fans know, the teams put that request in.
Yep.
You know, we want to play Seattle. If you're an NFC West opponent and you have to play Seattle and the Rams or the 49ers on the road, hey, can we do it back-to-back so we can stay out there? And for me, that's a great opportunity for team bonding. All this nonsense about training camps, team bonding, no. When you can go on those road trips, you better bond your team because those are the guys that are actually playing.
Yeah, I think the 49ers always do that whenever they have to travel out east. They always request it. I know they've had some Giants-Jets back-to-back weeks, and they've done some other ones where they request to stay out there at the Greenbrier in West Virginia, and they kind of they get to do that team bonding sort of thing there with the guys who are integral to the success of the team. I think the Houston Texans, I think it's safe to say they're not going to be at 1 o'clock every single week this year.
Yeah, no.
They might get a Sunday night game, a Monday night game. They'll get mixed in there in primetime. Everybody wants to see C.J. Stroud play in primetime.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're going to get probably 4 primetime games, I would suspect, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I would think Thursday night would want them to play Jacksonville. I mean, they're going to put them, or Houston with Elliott's Anthony Richardson. I mean, I think to me, if you're a schedule maker, and I can't speak for Will Hill because he handles all this for everybody, but to me, you know, you want to play like Richardson against Jacksonville or Houston early in the season when you know he's going to be healthy. That's going to be a great game. And look, you could schedule any game from the AFC North.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a great game because those 4 teams are good, right? You don't have to worry about that. Those 4 teams are good. They're going to play their asses off. Now, you can't count for injuries. We all understand that. But you know, it's funny, Femi. I've been going through this and working on teams and studying teams. Like everybody thinks about who's going to the Super Bowl. Who is going to be the worst team in the league next year?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
No, nobody talks about that because everybody, this time of the year, everybody has drank the Kool-Aid, right? Everybody is so happy and content. They can't see straight, right? Who is the worst team in the league right now when you look at the teams?
Well, I can tell you what the betting market thinks. They think it's the Carolina Panthers, who right now are 250-1 to win the Super Bowl. And Carolina, they made a number of adjustments, especially on that offensive line. My guess on the worst team, I would kind of lean towards New England a little bit. I would lean towards New England as the worst team in the league, for me, at least as it stands right now.
Well, okay, so Carolina, you know, Arizona, Washington won 4 games. The Giants won 6. New England won 4, the Chargers won 5, and Tennessee won 6, and the Jets won 7. So, you know, but there's going to be somebody else that's going to be involved in that, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it depends on. I think it goes to quarterbacks, right? How many games can Las Vegas win with Gardner Minshew? How many? I think you got to ask yourself that question, right? How many games can the Giants win with Daniel Jones? How many games can Washington win with Jaden Daniels, right? I mean, you would think that Arizona would be not a candidate because they're paying all this money to Kyler Murray, and you got to believe that he's going to lead them out of there, right? You know, I'm just guessing here. I'm spitballing here.
Yeah,
but to me,
it's early.
Where's the worst team?
Yeah, I mean,
it's early, but where's the worst team?
Yeah. Well, when you ask that question, it's like, how many games can New England win with Jacoby Brissett? Who, I mean, we'll see what's around him and how they play this year, and also in a tough AFC in that division, where those teams like Miami, the Jets, the Bills are all competing to be playoff contenders, if not Super Bowl contenders. It's no easy sledding out there in Foxborough for the New England Patriots. That would be my guess as of right now. But I mean, we still have to see what happens throughout the course of the OTAs and minicamp, who stays healthy, because knock on wood, unfortunately, we do get some of those injuries that happen during OTAs, minicamp, and training camp. We're hoping that none of that happens, but it's just the reality of the business. But that's where that's the team I would pinpoint as of right now, sitting here on May 9th.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're certainly a candidate. I think the Giants are a candidate. You know, I know they won 6 last year, but have they really improved their team? I don't know. You know, I mean, you know, Neighbors is a great player, but have they really improved their team? Carolina, 2 games. Canales, is he worth 2 more wins? Probably. They were so poorly coached last year. You know, Tennessee, do you trust Will Levis to win more than 6 games next year?
Not from anything I've seen.
You know, Denver win total is so low. Nobody thinks they're going to win any games. So I think it's really interesting. Everybody works who's winning the Super Bowl. I'm kind of working like who's going to be the worst team. Because like after the draft, where everybody got A's and B's, and we'll talk about this in the next block, which is fascinating. You know, nobody had a bad draft, essentially. You know, everybody kind of recouped it. Everybody's doing great. Everything's wonderful. It's just America. Everything's just delightful. Every player's great. There's no good players. They're all just great. And so, like, well, then who's going to – not everybody's going to be 8-9 or 9-8.
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be a bad team here somewhere, and usually bad teams are a reflection of bad coaching, bad scheme, and bad talent.
I think what you're saying is that this is essentially drink the Kool-Aid season, where everyone's drinking the Kool-Aid of, hey, we can be better than what we were last year.
Oh, yeah.
And we realize once training camp gets, and you always bring this point up every time we get around training camp, you kind of know it. Like, the people who are honest about things internally, they're like, oh, shit, we might be in a little bit of trouble here. You kind of know, even though on the outside looking in, you still want to go ahead and present that sort of positive sort of spin.
Yeah. I mean, look, Atlanta won 7 games last year. They did nothing to help a defense that finished 29th in the National Football League in creating turnovers. Nothing. And so, you know, is Cousins going to give them 4 more wins? Are they that good? You know, are they that good that Cousins is going to give them 4 wins? You know, New Orleans at the end of the year. Now, New Orleans is kind of an interesting team because they got Ricky Fowler playing quarterback for them, right? I mean, Derek Carr and Ricky Fowler, have you ever seen them in the same room together? I'm not sure they're not, right? You know, like, you know, Ricky Fowler, if he's at the Masters and, you know, and he makes the cut, but he's +8, you can count on him to shoot a 64 on Saturday to get him, you know, like, oh, wow, he's back in it. Then on Sunday, he can go back to, you know, same thing with Carr. You know, during the season, he was the shits, and then the last 5 weeks of the season, he played better when they were out of it, including beating Tampa and Tampa.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think we need to check on that. You know, there were 2 Lee Harvey Oswalds. I think I'm pretty clear that that's true. There were 2 people that were impersonating him. There may be 2 Ricky Fowlers. I don't know. Femi, you better look into this.
The stat patterns that we all love.
And I like Ricky. There's nobody can do more ads than Ricky can for not winning a major. Like, there is the definition of good that we all think is great.
Yeah, he's going to go ahead and backdoor a top 20, I'm sure, at the PGA Championship next week over at Valhalla.
Why not? Have his Puma orange on. Love the guy. Great guy. But I've been saying this for 5 years about him. Like, at some point, he's got to stop shaking hands after the golf tournament and say, I'm going to win this fucking thing.
He had a chance last year at the U.S. Open, but didn't quite close the door, as that's sort of been the theme of his career. A guy who is a closer, though, who has returned to the field, Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow, participating in a throwing session during the offseason workouts. And I'm sure if you're a Bengals fan, pleasant sight to see here as aspirations and expectations once again high for Cincinnati in a very difficult division.
You know, it's a good thing. Look, I'm not the old angry white guy on the lawn. It's a good thing, though, I don't run the Bengals. Like, what was that coach, Craig Thorpe, came out and said, Joe Burrow looks like he's back to square. Are you freaking kidding me? Like, the story isn't that Joe Burrow's back. The story would be if Joe Burrow can't be back. Yeah. Like, shut up. Like, don't tell anybody what's going on in your building. Like, they don't need to know Joe Burrow's throwing the ball good. Like let, look, if you want to get your name in the paper and you want to start promoting yourself for a head coaching job, that's great. But, like, don't jeopardize the team. It's like that guy that the Houston Rockets signed, Dalton, what's his name? The kid from Memphis, right?
Oh, Dylan Brooks.
He was going to kick LeBron's ass.
Yeah,
like,
Dylan Brooks. Yeah.
Dylan Brooks. Like, why you got to be stupid like that? Like, look, everybody knows Burrow's a really good player. Everybody knows Burrow he didn't get his leg amputated and his arm wasn't cut off. Like, we're assuming he's going to come back. I mean, we all think Aaron Rodgers is going to be perfect at 40 years old with an Achilles. We're worried about Joe Burrow throwing? I mean, come on. I know we're in the news cycle, but to me, when you're a young coach, like, you got to be really careful about what you're talking about, what you're saying, because you're affecting the team. Mm-hmm. You know, you're preparing yourself to be a head coach. So you don't have to be overly praising Joe Burrow. There's enough people that are doing that. All you need to say is, hey, look, Joe's working really hard. He's dedicated. He's going to, he wants to come back and lead our team, period. End of story.
Yeah. Burrow,
Joe doesn't need any of your praises on his back so that, he's promoting you for to me, it's the wrong messaging.
Well, it's just unnecessary is what it feels like to me.
I don't know. Maybe, it does. I mean, then it's like that's not a story that Joe Burrow's throwing it really good. The story is if he couldn't throw it.
And I think that set off some panic alarms out there in Cincinnati if that were the case. Burrow did tell reporters on Tuesday that he's been cleared for everything except for full contact. He also said he's physically stronger than he's ever been in his NFL career. So he feels good. They say he looks really good, but he's not quite cleared for contact yet, but there's no contact right now. That doesn't happen until September. But, I mean...
Why would you get cleared for contact? It's like, it goes back to Dottie. He's got a 7-iron in his hands. Like, a Dottie, no, he's got it in his ass. Like, why would you... There's no contact. How are you getting cleared for contact now? Come on.
You're ready for the PGA Championship next week? I can't wait to do it. Can Scheffler win again? Joe Burrow back on the field. We'll talk about a guy that's affecting his team in a negative way coming up here on the other side. This is the GM Shuffle, hanging out with you guys on the DraftKings Network.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
We don't say this lighthearted, but it's been a very tumultuous offseason for Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice. Of course, back in April last month, he was involved in a 6-car crash in Dallas. Actually, that was in March, but he was arrested in April. At least 7 people left with injuries. He's facing 1 count of aggravated assault, 1 count of collision involving serious bodily injury, and 6 counts of collision involving injury, according to police. So he already had that going on in this offseason from back in March. And then earlier this past weekend, he is suspected to be an alleged assault that he injured a man in a Dallas nightclub earlier this week. I mean, it's just, I don't know what's going on with him. Rashee Rice, 24 years old. You hope that he can get everything in order. But, I mean, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, I guess, how do you sort of navigate this from a team perspective? Obviously, very serious stuff that's going on outside of just the football aspect, but we're a football podcast, so we'll talk about that angle of it. From the team, how do you navigate this with a young wide receiver that you're counting on this season?
Well, I don't think you can count on them, right? I think you got to let due process. Everybody is innocent until proven guilty in this country, even though the media may want to kind of make it. But clearly, I think through the video, through eye cameras and all that crap that we see, that that Rice was not doing what he needed to do, and he wasn't compliant in the road rage thing. I mean, he left the scene of that accident, and any detective answered, it would be deductive reasoning. Why did he leave? Mm-hmm. Is he that much of a inhumane person that he wasn't concerned about the people that could have got injured, or was there some other circumstances on why he left? Right? Okay. Did he have something on him? Did he not want the police to know? All those things come into play here. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're Brad Veach and Andy Reid, I think you forget about what he can get convicted of. I think you have to find out through your own detective, and each team has a detective to kind of help them navigate these waters. And then this next incident comes up, and that becomes a real issue. So to me, I think if you're Brett Veach and Andy Reid, you're going to stand with them because you got to show the other players on your team that you're not going to just acquiesce based on the evidence, or when you hear the evidence, then you've got to act. It goes back to, it really, everything can come back to The Sopranos, right? It's like when Uncle Junior was waiting for, Tony to do something about, Brendan Falcone, and he ended up putting a bullet in his eye, and then he gave Chrissy the high colonic, and so like he wanted timely discipline. And I think as an executive, you want to send a message to your team in a timely fashion. Now, they said he can't come to training camp, he can't come to OTAs, he can do it on Zoom. To me, I think once they go through the process, once they learn what they need to know, then they need to take action.
Yeah, it said the police said no charges related to the alleged assault had been filed as of Tuesday afternoon. But the legal process will obviously play out. But we know that the NFL, the league, they can go ahead and suspend guys despite whatever the legal process says. So I would imagine for Kansas City, this is probably looking at one of those, conduct detrimental to the league? Or I forgot how they phrase it in terms of the suspensions there.
He's going to get, I think Veach knows he's going to get suspended. Look, that's not... Look, he was the best of their group. Does that mean he's the best? I think he needs a really good offseason to improve his craft. I said this on our show, Femi. I think that the Chiefs have to stay to what they did last year. I don't think they can expand and go back to being the Chiefs of old. Kelsey's 36. Are they really good at receiver? They got to run this thing through Pacheco. We don't know who the left tackle is going to be. They're not great at right tackle to begin with. Taylor was. They kind of had a masquerade around that offensive line last year. So, then where are they on defense? Losing Snead's huge for them, right? Snead was huge for them. So Chris Jones comes back. He's paid, great player. They've got a lot of good players, but, it's hard to get that back 3 years in a row. I know they got the best player in the league at Mahomes, but it's going to require everybody focusing and concentrating.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation for Rashee Rice and everybody that's obviously involved in it, from the accident in March and now this alleged assault that took place in a Dallas nightclub this past week. And hopefully everything gets in order and he can get on the straight and narrow, because right now this has been a pretty bad offseason for him. And the Kansas City Chiefs will have to go ahead and deal with the ramifications of that moving forward here. You mentioned the L'Jarius Sneed trade. They traded him to Tennessee. The Titans, they've been active in trying to get some help at wide receiver for their second-year quarterback, Will Levis. Earlier this week, they signed Tyler Boyd to a one-year deal, $4.5 million. And the big question is, does this help Will Levis, as they went ahead and added Calvin Ridley in free agency, kind of in the 11th hour, stealing him away from Jacksonville, and now they go ahead and get Tyler Boyd, reuniting him with Brian Callahan?
Well, it gets him a slot receiver, right? And, the thing you always have to look at with these contracts is $4.5 million base salary. Not a lot of money. Not when guys are getting $20 million. So clearly, Cincinnati could have matched this. And he'll say he didn't want to go back to Cincinnati, but clearly they could have. Cincinnati decided that they wanted to go younger, get another guy in there that fits what they want to do. I think if you're Tennessee, I did Tennessee radio yesterday, and I think the concern you have to have is Boyd's not a separation receiver, nor is Hopkins. And Ridley's going to play on the outside. They need Burks to give them some vertical outside speed. But the way that Levis is so inconsistent in terms of his accuracy, everybody thinks the receivers are going to make Levis better. No. Levis makes the receivers better. The quarterback always makes the receiver better. It's not the other way around. It's not the other way around. So, look, they've improved their offensive line with players and coaching, with Billy Callahan coming in to coach them. And obviously Boyd knows the Brian Callahan offensive system, but to me, if they're an 11 personnel team and they're trying to run the ball from offset I with Pollard and Spears, and they got to protect their two tackles, I think this is going to be this will be hard. Then you're putting the ball really in Levis. It's one thing to put the ball in Joe Burrow's hands. It's another thing to put the ball in Levis' hands.
Yeah. And we just said in the last segment that based on what we've seen so far, how could you have confidence in Will Levis to go ahead and take this next step? Now, he's still a young quarterback. Maybe he improves. But you said it even before he was drafted. This was a 5'9" player. When you looked at him on film, you saw some flashes of, big arm in his first start against the Atlanta Falcons. But then you saw some of the mistakes that showed up at Kentucky and at Penn State, to where It's a big question mark here with Will Levis. But when I think of this move and all the moves that the Tennessee Titans have made over the last couple of years, and I get it was a different regime. Rand Carthon had no part of this. But, I mean, doesn't this all go back to the A.J. Brown trade that they made a few years ago on draft night to where they didn't want to pay A.J. Brown, so they get ahead and drafted Treylon Burks, the same Treylon Burks who has 1 touchdown through 2 seasons so far in his career. Like, this, you're trying to make up for that decision that was made by John Robinson on draft night sending A.J. Brown to Philadelphia.
Well, I mean, look, here's the reality of it, though, right? This is the perfect example that the 49ers didn't go down this offseason. Like, A.J. Brown wasn't worth the player that you traded for. See, everybody wants you to trade the guy for a first-round pick, but they don't put the name in. Mm-hmm. They don't put the name of the player that you're getting back. So at the end of the day, John Robinson traded A.J. Brown for Treylon Burks. Not a good trade, horrible trade, right? He got a 1. He got a 1. That's a great trade. He got a 1 for AJ. No, the draft pick becomes a player. And so when the Niners are sitting there with Ayuk, and once Odunze went, and I'm not sure they would have taken Odunze. I don't know their draft board. But once he went, there was no other guy that they felt could be an outside number 1 receiver. I know they drafted Pearsall at the bottom of the first, but the bottom of the first is way different than what Ayuk is. I know they got Ayuk in the mid-20s. But the reality of it, you couldn't replace him for anything they were offering. So why would you make that trade? And then when you combine, I mean, what Rand Carthon's trying to overcome is the lack of drafting done by, I mean, just flat out misses by, in 2 drafts in a row by Robertson. Isaiah Wilson in 20 and then Farley in 21. I mean, it's just their drafts have been really, especially in the first round where you're counting on some help, have depleted the roster poorly. And I think that's really what he's trying to overcome. And this trade is symbolic, a lesson for all personnel people, that you have to put the name of the player into the pick. It's one thing to trade a guy for a 4th-round pick. You're getting rid of him. You want a younger player. You think he's a 58 or a 59. He's not good enough. Okay, you don't know who you're going to get, but you know you don't want him, right? Mm-hmm. Or you have somebody on your team who's just as good. But to trade him out, all of a sudden now it's a whole different ballgame. And I think that's the lesson here. That's why, we're going to talk about the drafts. Everybody thinks about, like if John Robinson is honest with himself and he looks at his process of drafting, you have to study it. Just like I got to study the mistakes that I've made. Like everybody is so hypertensive about talking about the drafts and the mistakes we all make. But Jesus Christ, when you go through this draft and you start looking at over the last 3 years at some of the blown picks, anybody from the outside looking in would say there's something inherently wrong with the process that these teams are using to select players. Like, there should be a radical change. I mean, I was just going through it this morning, Femi. Mm-hmm. In 2020, right? I mean, Young, Akua, Simmons, Henderson, all blown picks top 10. Becton, Ruggs, Kinlaw, Judy, Arnett. Judy got traded, And then in the 20s, you got Rieger, Murray, Wilson, and the kid from the Miami draft that I can't say his last name, the corner who they traded to Dallas. So that's a horrendous – I mean, there's so many – and so if you're really being honest with yourself, if you're a general manager and you're trying to figure it out, and don't come tell me – that we need more analytics, because if you go through Pro Football Focus's write-up of the 21 draft, and we'll go through it in the next block, like they ain't even close. Like that ain't the way to go either. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying the people that evaluate are perfect, me included, but there's got to be a different way of doing it. Like the system's broken with how many picks have been blown.
What do you think is the problem, like the root cause of this here? I mean, obviously we'd all be making millions of dollars if we could find this out, but like, what do you think it is? Media. I think people. I think the draft, and this is why I can't wait to talk to Rudy Sutherland. I think the draft is a behavioral science event, not a decision-making event. I think it's the behaviors of people and the collection of thoughts, and it's the wisdom of the crowd or the gossip of the crowd that creates illusions. And I think the number one reason why it's so bad is very few people that work on the draft understand the NFL. Very few. And I think very few people understand the art of team building. They understand how to scout a player. He's a good player.
Does he fit what we do? Does he understand the scheme? Can we develop him? Where is the development program? All those things. It needs a radical makeover.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We're about to break it down on the other side. For our DraftKings Network audience, we're going to say goodbye to you guys, but make sure you check it out in podcast form. Podcast audience, stick around here because we're going to go ahead and grade this 2021 draft class. All the fifth-year options have been put out there for this class. We're going to break it down, who hit, who missed. We'll discuss it next here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
All right, here's the skinny on the class of 2021 that we are about to grade here on the GM Shuffle. 18 of the 32 first-round picks from 2021 had their fifth-year options picked up, but only one quarterback, which is something that we sort of try to remind people of during this draft process of, hey, there could be 5-6 guys taken in the first round here in 2024, but maybe don't get too excited because the 2021 class of all these guys changing teams outside of Trevor Lawrence kind of gives you pause a little bit there when you see how some of these things play out if you don't really develop them. But Michael, what's your big takeaway? I mean, I look at all the non-quarterbacks in the top 15, they all hit. It seems like at least getting their fifth-year options picked up, their teams want to go ahead and continue down that road.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I went through it. And again, I think you have to be really, like, I'm not trying to sit here being a know-it-all, right? Mm-hmm. I think, to me, there is not enough time spent on studying the draft by the executives. Like, I really believe all draft meetings should be filmed. I believe draft day should be filmed in its entirety. It should be broken down. It should be analyzed by the general manager and the director of personnel sitting in the room deciding on, okay, here's what happened. What was the call? I think there needs to be a complete autopsy after every single draft through video and then through the understanding of what you did. But I think, and then you need to go back to those tapes in 21 and understand what happened. Why did we have this? And like, so when I'm talking about, and I'm not making fun of Pro Football Focus or Mel or any of those, I'm just saying there's a perception that never meets the reality. Like, for example, when Kellen Mond got selected, you know, in the third round, I thought Kellen Mond was a disaster. I think Jimbo Fisher, and I think I made it abundantly clear that his offense is not, you cannot call this a pro-style offense. It's unfair to the word pro. It's an amateur offense. It has nothing, it resembles nothing of a high-level offensive coordinator in the NFL. I don't give a shit what any of those college announcers talk about because they're getting information from Jimbo when they covered his game. He never had a pro-style offense. And so when you look at Kellen Mond and you watched him play, the guy had zero anticipation. He had zero footwork. He could run, but he had none of the ability to play the quarterback. But in this draft at 66th pick overall, you know, Mel said, you know, Mond won't push Cousins immediately, but he has a tremendous skill set. And he's one of college's most productive quarterbacks over the past few years. He's worth a shot in the third. Like, to me, that when you say he's worth a shot, that means you don't know. Mm-hmm. Like, that's when you say to me, well, I had to make this bet because the odds were too good. Even if you know it's not going to come true. Like, if you know it's a bad bet, how can they make the odds good enough for you? Right? That fascinates me about pro betting, right? Oh, I couldn't turn down the number. Well, you know it's not true. You know, I mean, Justin Fields is going to win MVP, and you can get him at 40-1. I don't give a shit if you get him to 4,000-1. He ain't going to win it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that. When you put in there, it's worth a shot. We can't be taking shots in the third round. And then Pro Football Focus wrote, Mond is one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the 21 draft. He dropped back pass over 1,500 times in Jimbo's Fisher pro-style offense at Texas A&M. He also brings in athleticism, a decent arm, but he didn't lead to too many high-end plays on tape. Absolutely accurate. He does provide an upgrade over Minnesota's current background options, putting him in line to sit behind Kirk Cousins. I mean, like, to me, like, that there was no way that pick matches. Now, when you go through the grades, you know, the Chargers got an A in that draft, right? Miami got an A in that draft. They picked Phillips, right? They picked Phillips. They got 3 starters. Phillips has been hurt quite a bit. You know, And so the Bears got Mel gave him a B+, Pro Football Focus gave him an A+. They have one player left on the team, Jenkins, who's an inside guard. Like, that's what you need to really do. Everybody focuses on the option. Did we pick up the option? Like Tennessee's draft in 21 was a disaster, right? You wonder why they're struggling now? The Raiders draft in 2021 was a complete disaster. Alex Leatherwood, they have Malcolm Kuntz still on the team, but this was this combined with Cleveland Farrell, Henry Ruggs, and Arnett the year before. Nobody has destroyed the Raiders more than what John did when he went in there, and then when Josh came in and traded away the picks. Like this, basically the Raiders have been a team operating with no farm system.
Jonathan Abram in that group as well, who they picked in the first round. That was one of the 3 first-round picks that they got that year when they traded Mack and Amari Cooper.
Don't tell me, if you brought any outside consultant in and you said, look this over and tell me, are we doing things right? Are we doing things the correct way by sending scouts on the road, collecting data? Like, where is the fault within the system? Like, where is the breakdown within this? There is a complete breakdown. Is it the scouts aren't educated enough? Is it the decision makers aren't educated enough? Is it the media influencing us? Like, what is the root cause on why we can't draft better? If you're not doing that, you're really not committed to winning. And even if you have a good team, you got to do that. Because it's high stakes more than it's ever been. The Tennessee Titans are in this position because of it. The Raiders have a depleted talent. The Raiders, you want to look at some bad drafts? Go look at the Giants. They'll all get all huffy and puffy and get Lombardi just doesn't like the Giants. Look at your drafts. Tell me they've been good.
Don't get Carl Banks after
tell me
you
they've
again.
been good. I'm okay on that. I'm a big boy. Tell me they've been good. I've had shitty drafts too, but I think to me, you got to figure out why. Like, everybody is so fucking sensitive about it. It's okay to question Kyle Shanahan's play calling. It's okay to question, a defensive call, but it's not okay to question the procedures of a draft. It's all screwed up. It's really, and then because there's no player development attached to it, the draft becomes so bad. And it's like, look, Oklahoma City Thunder, if you want to really understand how you should, look at what they do. They have Presti can evaluate talent, right? Mm-hmm. He understands how to build a team. He was fortunate to get a couple high picks. He's had really good player development. Some guys he's picked in the second round, whether it's Jalen Williams, whether it's Wiggins, whoever it was, they develop them. And then he's got so many draft picks left over that he doesn't have to say, well, I got to sign this guy because I have nobody else. He'll let a guy go because he's got fucking 97 first-round picks due to him. I'll replace that guy with a cheaper player.
Yeah. And it's also knowing the kind of profile of that, which goes back to continuity, which is why teams like the Steelers, the Ravens, the Eagles, some of these teams, they've had so much continuity in the front office to where they know the exact profile of a player that they want to get that fits their system. Because that's what you talked about in the last segment. Oftentimes people just scout the player. They don't scout, how will this player fit in said system for this team? Because not every player fits for all 32 teams, despite what some may think. That player's good, he'll be good anywhere. It's not necessarily. He may be okay, but he's not going to be as good as he is in a certain particular team there. In your opinion, I guess, what do you think makes a good draft? Is it hitting a couple of players? Is it just maybe getting one great player, then everything else after that doesn't matter? What do you think makes a good draft, in your opinion?
Well, Parsons is the 21 pick for Dallas. That was a great draft. He changes the game. So whatever you did after that is pretty good. I think what makes a great draft is is based on each round. Are you getting what the round should represent? In the second round, okay, Atlanta takes the Super Bowl winning GM Terry Fontenot takes Richie Grant as a safety at the top of the second round. Is he, and then he comes back and he takes offensive lineman at 68, Jalen Mayfield. Then he takes corner Darren Hall. Then he takes center Drew Dahlman. Stop me when you hear a good player, please. Don't be so quiet over there, Femi. Speak up. And he takes Kyle Pitts, the 5th pick overall in the draft. He takes Kyle Pitts, the 5th pick overall in the draft, which lends itself to no history Again, not second-order thinking. Okay, let's talk Pitts. How is Pitts a game changer? Pitts is a game changer if what has to be true for Pitts to be a game changer? He's got to be able to block. And he's got to be able to defeat any linebacker who lines up over him, and he's got to be able to win against corners. Because if he can't block, they're going to treat him like a receiver.
Yep.
Okay? And is he a number one receiver? Kansas City gets Kelsey in the third round. You're picking Pitts fifth overall. Is this guy going to be as good as Kelsey, and does he have the same thing as Kelsey? See, that's the question. Now, just for the record, I just want you to know this. They got a B- for that draft. They got a B- for that draft.
Yeah.
So, you can't go by the grade, right? I mean, Washington, in this draft, Washington got a solid B. Okay, can I read you the draft picks?
Please.
Jamin Davis, linebacker, Kentucky. Samuel Cosme, offensive tackle. Benjamin St. Juste, corner. Diamond Brown, John Bates, Derek Forrest, Cameron Cheeseman, William Bradley King, Shaka Toney, Dax Millen. They got a B. They don't have a player, but they got a B. Now, don't tell me, I'm not saying Marty Herney's not any good. I'm not saying Martin Mayhew. I'm saying if this draft has produced this, you better study your procedures. Because it's either you're really bad at what you do or the process is screwed up. But everybody's so sensitive about it. We picked Mingo. Where did we go wrong with Mingo? What had to be true for Mingo to be a good player was Mingo had to handle power, right? There were times when you watched Mingo, you thought he could. And there were times that you realized he couldn't. And that blew the pick. And that was on us for doing it, right? That was on us. And so I think to me, that's how you have to look at it. You got to be able to go back. Okay, so from now on, ever since that, you're just so sensitive to ends that don't play with power. It's really, really difficult. But if you're not going to study it, how the hell are you going to get any better? And I promise you, every personnel director in the league after that draft, most of the high-level guys are not working on the draft. They're not studying the draft. They're going out to practice. They're getting their chewing gum. They're watching, and they're telling everybody how great their team is. That's what they're doing. Because this is vacation time at work in the NFL. You don't work too hard. Can't work too hard. But you're in the data collection business, and if you're not analyzing the data and you have video, Bill Walsh made me and Neil Dolan tape Mickey, my son, called me up and said, Dad, do you realize they tape every single thing here at the 49ers, every meeting? I said, that goes back to Bill Walsh. He said, yeah. I said, in 7 Nevada Street, in the pro room, Alan Webb and Neil Dallin had an office, and I had to go up there and hit the button. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. Hit the button. When Bill stopped talking, I hit the other button when it stopped, right? And so what that did was any player who was sick or missed a meeting, he came back and looked at the tape and could get the install. But every coach who came in, like when Mike Shanahan came in with George Seifert as the head coach, he just went back and studied all those Bill Walsh meeting tapes because he didn't know the West Coast offense. He had a different offense. So now he's caught up. Why wouldn't you do that for the draft?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you tape your draft room?
Well, isn't it because people don't want those receipts out there? I would imagine, isn't that the case? Because things over the years get convoluted. Like, oh no, we wanted this guy. I didn't really like that guy. Isn't that the conversation around this stuff?
I mean, if I was the president of the Jets and my media company put out Douglas and Saleh making fun of all these teams in the league in their 30-minute thing that they put out, I would be embarrassed. Like, that's embarrassing. See, that's the way the league is, and certainly we were all part of it, is you make fun of other teams. And what I've learned through my life is, don't make fun of anybody. Learn from them. Learn from them. Like, why is their process wrong? Like, Pittsburgh, I think they got a B- or a C in this draft, right? I think they did. Hold on here.
A C+ from Mel Kiper.
By the way, the Raiders, Mel gave the Raiders a B-. Alex Leatherwood, Mooring, Kuntz, Diablo, Gillespie, Hobbs, and Morrissey, right? Mm-hmm. I mean,
the Raiders, they got a D from CBS.
Pittsburgh got a C+, right? And why did Pittsburgh get a C+? Because they drafted a running back and nobody liked it. even though they didn't pick up his option, but he's a good player. Freiermuth might be one of the best tight ends in the league. He can block at the end of the line, and he can get you involved. Watch Freiermuth have a hell of a year this year. If I'm in fantasy, I'm taking Freiermuth. So, anyway.
To your credit, the Jets who were laughing at people about what they were doing. In 2021, it was Zach Wilson, second overall, Elijah Vera Tucker, who's an integral piece of their offensive line, Elijah Moore, not on the team, and there was Michael Carter, Jamie and Sherwood, Michael Carter, the safety, Jason Pinnock, Hamza, I can't even pronounce that name, Brandon Eccles, and then Jonathan Marshall were the picks for the New York Jets. So outside of Elijah Vera Tucker, I'm not sure if there's anything to really write home about there for Gang Green for 2021's class.
Look, we're not going to hit all the picks, right? There's not enough good players. Mm-hmm. But as Walsh would often say to us, we only need 12. That was when we were drafting 12. If you only need 7, you just got to hit with the right 7. Now, you're going to lose some. We get that. And you're going to make some mistakes. But if you don't learn from your mistakes, if you're not understanding your mistakes, you're screwed.
100%. That's what you got to do in the draft. But people want, instead of learning, it's all about covering your ass. And so the draft will forever be in secrecy.
Yeah. And you get the – I wish I had these people grade me when I was at fucking Hofstra. I'd have been a hell of a student.
There are a couple tough graders out there, but for the most part, I think C was your worst grades. Pete Prisco over at CBS, he was giving out some Ds. Give a D to the Seahawks, the Raiders, and the Texans for those years.
Like Pete, that's based on what Pete thinks. Basically that's the student grading the teacher, and so that's wrong. Like even if you got an A+, it's wrong. I'm not making fun of Pete, but Pete doesn't know anything about it. I mean, Pete was giving me shit. I did NFL Network. He was giving me shit when we debated the greatness of Blake Bortles. I was on NFL Network, and he was working, and he came on to debate me because he wanted to stick it up my ass. I mean, like, okay, let's do this. Let's have this talk. The guy sucks.
The greatness of Blake Bortles. That's not something that I thought we were going to hear today on the podcast, but hey, you know what? He had a career as a backup, at least. Made it to the AFC title game there with the Jacksonville Jaguars back in 2017. But that does it for this edition of the GM Shuffle podcast. Thank you to our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. As always, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. The YouTube comments, they're flowing in. Keep liking those YouTube. Keep commenting on the YouTube videos. We really appreciate all of that stuff. It really goes
thumbs up,
a long way.
Yeah, give us a thumbs up. We need thumbs up, right? That's the key thing, because every JFK video I watch, I give a thumbs up, yeah.
Except for Gerald Posner's. Except for those.
I don't watch any of his shit, or Vincent Begosi. I don't watch any of his shit. It's as the great Frank Pantangeli said, it's lies, 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 just lies.
Keep smashing that like button. Thumbs up for all the GM Shuffle videos. Check them out over on the DraftKings YouTube page. Michael, I will see you on Monday. We'll get some more of these rookie camps, and then this time next week, we'll be breaking down a schedule, all 272 regular season games. And then we have some games to look forward to. And we'll have some betting markets as well in that regard. All right, that does it for this edition of the pod. Everyone be well, have a safe weekend, and we'll talk to you guys on Monday.